Good evening, citizens of Portsmouth, invited guests, city staff, my colleagues on city council, and welcome to our public work session on today, April 23rd. And before I begin and ask my colleagues to acknowledge their presence electronically, I want to welcome our new city manager, Mr. Stephen Carter. With that, I would ask all my colleagues to note their attendance electronically.
6 members of City Council are present.
Thank you, ma'am. And also, I want to acknowledge our Deputy City Clerk, Ms. Anita, is going to be handling duties for this evening. That is Miss Anita Sherrod. Mr. Carter, you have the floor, sir.
Good morning. Good afternoon, Mayor.
Afternoon, sir.
Vice Mayor, Council, welcome again. But tonight we will talk about 3 things. Mostly naturally focused on the budget for this year. Mr. Trey Burke is here and he will lead the discussion this evening. And there are 3 presentations that we'd like to make to you. First one is about the capital improvement program. The second is the budget drivers. And then the third thing is the council requests. So, if Mr. Burke, you have the floor, sir. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Glover, Vice Mayor Lucas Burke, members of City Council.
Good evening, sir.
Tonight I will review the fiscal year 2020-25 through 2029 capital program, its evaluation criteria, and considerations for new projects, including projects being considered for infrastructure bill funding. The Capital Improvement Program, also known as the CIP, is a 5-year plan that addresses procurement and construction of capital assets, as well as ongoing maintenance of city infrastructure through replenishment and replacement projects. The CIP's first year is the only appropriated year. Subsequent years provide a plan for addressing future infrastructure needs with projected expenditures and resources. Capital projects may take more than 1 fiscal year, and as such, the funding is authorized by project, and project is closed upon completion. Governments use capital improvement plans to identify present and future needs requiring capital infrastructure. A list of the projects and capital programs planned for the city with corresponding revenues and financing sources is created. The CIP is programmed into 9 specific program areas that encompass every component of the capital infrastructure program. The program areas are consistent with standard practices, including the Government Finance Officers Association practices, and are similar to cities and counties throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. There are 3 capital project funds: the General CIP, the Public Utility Enterprise CIP, and the Parking Authority's CIP. Capital planning is critical to water, sewer, transportation, sanitation, and other essentials public services. It is also an important component of a community's economic development program and strategic plan. The CIP development team reviewed and examined existing and future capital projects, which align with the City Council's adopted financial policies. The proposed fiscal year 2020-25 through 2029 capital program reflects the city's health, safety, and welfare needs. While the proposed fiscal year 2025 program will be appropriated on council adoption, future years are non-appropriated and for planning purposes only. Future needs may change as the needs of the city change. The total capital program proposal includes water, sewer, drainage and street improvements, education, industrial and economic development, leisure services, municipal facilities, the parking authority, and equipment replacement. The one-year proposed capital program includes projects to maintain the health, safety, and welfare of the city. These projects total to $95.6 million. The capital program is funded by a mixture of operating budget transfers and bond issuances, as well as grants. The debt service usually has a lifespan of 20 years. A discussion of projects by CIP category will follow on the next slides. We have the sewer section, and if anyone has any questions, Mr. James Wright is here to answer any questions that you may have on specific projects. And also note that these are the projects that have additional funding. There may be projects which do not have additional funding being programmed this year that are not included in the presentation, but may still be ongoing. The sewer category has 3 projects and totals $14 million. The water includes 9 projects and totals $28.5 million. And this also begins the work with the dams in Suffolk that the city owns that provide our drinking water. Drainage and street improvements totaling $22.7 million. Education totaling $1.6 million. However, there are 2 projects that staff is looking for. Go to slide 12. Yes. So staff is looking for consensus on 2 capital projects that were not included in the manager's proposed budget. They are a Career and Technical Education Center, CTE Center. We will be proposing adding $6 million to fund the continued rehabilitation and design of the former DAC facility that schools owns, and that would be to have it be used as a CTE center. The other project would be to add $500,000 for design and program, or for initial design and programming of a new K-8 school. This would be the start, and then in future years we'd have money for more in-depth engineering drawings, and then further out from that would be the actual construction. Staff is looking for some consensus on these items. All right, if we can go back to slide 11, and we'll skip 2 forward. The community and economic development totaling $400,000. All right, leisure services. All these cities' parks and also golf infrastructure and some active recreation. Those total $3.8 million. Municipal facilities totaling $16.8 million, $16.9 million. Not included for additional funding this year, but it's my understanding there's enough funding existing in the capital improvement fund to fund City Hall elevators, but this does include an additional $2 million for the plumbing system at City Hall. Parking authority, this is $150,000 just to continue any maintenance projects in the parking authority CIP. And equipment replacement. $10.5 million for this, and this includes vehicles, equipment for public safety, especially that for ambulances and EMS. And then also on the next slide, we'd be looking for consensus on a new revenues collection software. This would be a single portal revenue system so that individuals, they could log on to the city's website and have one credential and pay for any of their bills with that with one credential. So they would pretty much open it up, put in their login or their credential, and then see all the bills that they owe, as opposed to having to use discrete systems to pay them. All right, at this time, I'll pause for any questions. All right. It is my pleasure to discuss with you the fiscal year 2020-25 proposed budget.
Excuse me, Mr. Burke. Councilman Hugo does have a question. I'm sorry, Councilman Hugo, sir, you have the floor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So you didn't think we were going to get out of this without questions? Surely you didn't think that, Mr. Burke.
Absolutely not.
Okay, good. All right, so just, I'll make a point with the new city manager. So when Mr. Burke and I met to go through budget detail, I asked him to communicate to you, so now I'm going to do it myself. The details that are in our CIP book are not sufficient to understand what we're really doing. And I'll give you an example. So we've been wrestling with sewer transfer station repairs for a while. And we have sewer transfer stations all over the city that are in various states of being brought back up to snuff. But when you go to budget, so I'm on slide 7. So the second bullet down is sewer pump station improvements. We're going to spend $7 million. The budget, the CIP book page is 16-9. When you go to that page in the book, there's no level of detail to explain which sewer pump stations we're going after next. So when I go to Civic League meetings and I get asked, hey, there's a portable generator sitting beside my sewer pump station and it's running all night long, making all kind of noise, I don't have any ability to answer the question, where on the list of repairs is that pump station so that the real generator inside the building is going to get fixed and the portable generators making all the noise beside the building gets taken away. So it would be helpful, and that's just one example, but I pointed out a bunch of examples to Mr. Burke as we were going through the CIP book where the level of detail in the CIP write-ups just really isn't sufficient to help us understand for these multi-year projects that are pieces of things that are getting fixed, whether it's sewer or water or roads or whatever, what's getting fixed with the money that we're setting aside for FY25 versus what's further on down the road. So it'd be helpful to put that budget detail in. Okay, so next item. So I'm on slide 5. A couple interesting things on slide 5. So slide 5 is the 5-year capital program. If you look at the education line, it's remarkably a flat line of $1.65 million year over year over year over year. So I'm not speaking out of school because we had this discussion, Mr. Burke and I also had the discussion at the school board liaison meeting with Dr. Bracey and Mr. Falk. And actually, Dr. Patton was there, as was Mr. Wright. So my question, when we met to talk about this, $1.65 million is what we've set aside for the school's CIP program for next year out of $95 million. Something wrong with that. So the schools have been saying for a while now, our K through 8 school is our numero uno priority. So I asked the question during our budget meeting, and I asked the question again during the school board liaison meeting. So there's not even a K through 8 page in the CIP book. So if we want to do a K through 8 school, we need to figure out where in the debt plan paying the K through 8 school construction resides and work ourselves backwards. And through the course of doing that in the school board liaison meeting, what we concluded was, and Mr. Wright correctly said it, we need $500,000 in the FY25 CIP to do the programming, basically to gather all of the desirements for this K through 8 school, over the next year, so that next year, FY '26, we can move into the detailed design of what that school is going to look like, so that the next year, FY '27 and '28, we're actually constructing that school, because the opportunity in our debt plan opens up at the end of that time frame to actually pay for all of that school construction. Well, when we started this whole discussion about CIP several weeks ago, in the budget book, nothing was in there, nothing. And so it's my opinion that we have a broken process. There needs to be some work done between the city staff, the school board, and the city council to go address how we're doing CIP planning for the schools. And all I have to do is point to the education line on slide 5 that shows 1.65 million ad infinitum is all we're setting aside for schools, to know that's just a placeholder, because we don't have a plan. And so we got to get the city and the schools working together to build an integrated plan, because right now the process that we're using doesn't get us there. And the fact that we're now looking on slide 12, I guess it is. So let's go find $6 million to finish the CTE school that, by the way, last year wasn't in the CIP plan and got put into the CIP plan as a result of the school system having an end-of-year surplus, that they came back and asked City Council, hey, we want to redeploy that end-of-year surplus to put a down payment on the CTE school. So that was never planned. And now we have a K through 8 school that, at least here on this brief, we're saying, okay, we recognize we need the $500,000 to do the programming this year. By the way, when we built the budget book, we didn't put that $500,000 in there. So there's $500,000 of something else that's in the budget book that's going to have to give way if, in fact, we're going to make the down payment on that K through 8 school programming. Process is broken. We need the right people to get around the table and work our way through how we're going to do the process better for, too late for this year, how we're going to do it better for next year, starting in July, I guess, which is when Mr. Burke tells me that you all start doing the early stages of CIP planning. We need to draw out Portsmouth Public Schools into those discussions so that we're actually building a CIP plan for the long term. Okay, so that's schools. So now look at the very next line on slide 5. Next line on slide 5 is industrial and economic development. So if you go back to page slide 11. So slide 11, those are the details for that line on slide 5, $400,000. The very last bullet there, $100,000 for resiliency planning. So right across the river, Norfolk's getting ready to spend $1 billion plus of federal money because they did resiliency planning several years ago and pulled together the water is washing over our shores plan. We need to do something about the increase in sea level. Well, when they finish investing that $1 billion plus of federal money, where do you suppose the water's going to go? It's going to go all over High Street in Portsmouth because they ain't going to have any other place to go. So here's another case where if you look at slide 5, it's $400,000 year after year after year, which suggests to me that the resiliency planning piece of that is $100,000 year after year after year. There's nothing in here that even talks about what are we going to do to put ourselves in a position to ask the feds for the same kind of sea level rise program in Portsmouth, the way Norfolk got in front of it and asked for it for them. And so my ask to you is, we need to, again, go back and take a look at this item in CIP, because spending $100,000 a year from now till the cows come home, I don't think is going to get us in a position to deal with the sea level rise on the Portsmouth waterfront the way our neighbors across the river are now dealing with it. We got to make some hard decisions about figuring out this problem so that we get our iron in the fire when it comes to getting federal help and federal relief on that problem. Other than that, Mr. Burke, you did a great job.
Thank you, sir. All important issues, and we will move forward with that. Vice Mayor Lucas Burke, ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Burke, for the presentation. Just have a couple questions on slide 8, where it talks about the dam upgrades. I know that we recently had a meeting with our congressional legislator, Congressman Bobby Scott, and I know that dams was listed on our talking points. Does the amount that's shown there, the $5 million, does that include the federal requests that were made from the congressman?
No, ma'am. We would have programmed that in the year we expect it to come to the city,
Okay,
and for the phase of the project with which we expect it to come to the city. So that would be in a construction phase in a future year. But that doesn't mean we're not getting it. It doesn't mean we're not expecting to get it.
okay. So this just shows what we need to complete the dam.
I believe this would be design funding, correct? Preliminary engineering.
Okay, all right. And then next page, slide 9. I guess the bridge repairs for $3 million and the bridge replacement for the $5.5 million. That's the Churchland Bridge work that's already done and completed, or is that something else?
So the Victory Creek, Paradise Creek, Victory Boulevard, Paradise Creek, that's the bridge that goes down Elm Street, right? Sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor,
Good evening, sir.
Vice Mayor, members of the City Council. So the Paradise Creek Bridge is the one on the backside of Craddock.
Yes.
That is the one that will go to construction later this fall. And bridge repairs is, we have several other bridges other than Churchland and Paradise Creek Bridge that need just routine maintenance, and that's what that line is for.
Okay, gotcha. All right, and then I guess I thought seeing drainage and street improvements, I didn't see anything on here referencing Ebony Heights, and I know I met a lady at the BJ's yesterday that said that they are still having some issues with the drainage and some broken pipes and flooding, and I thought we had a line item for Ebony Heights that was going to address some of those matters.
It's not a specific line item that falls into two of the stormwater fund categories. So we have one Ebony Heights project, Ebony Heights West, that that provides an additional outfall going towards Tarnick Road. And then we have Ebony Heights East project that's actually within the neighborhood, and that's a neighborhood rehabilitation project that's stormwater, water, and sewer, similar to what we've done in other neighborhoods.
Okay,
And those are both currently under design. The one on the west, that's ARPA funding, so that'll be advertised, and those funds will be encumbered prior to the end of this year. The one on the west side has some additional coordination with the various private utilities before we put those phases out for construction.
okay, got it. And then you segued me right into ARPA funds for slide 12, where it's speaking to the new K-8 school. I know that the ARPA funds for the schools were allocated in a way that they do the work and then they get reimbursement for the ARPA funds. So does the ARPA funds from the schools, is that still a valid option for us to consider once we are working on these CIP projects?
So their ARPA funds are for air quality projects.
Okay.
As taking you back to when City Council appropriated ARPA funds, we appropriated $1 million to do the design because they were reimbursable. So we did all the design for their projects, and we're just waiting on concurrence and permission from Virginia DOE to move forward. Those projects are designed and ready to go, and once we get that approval, we'll go ahead and get those projects out for bid.
Okay, all right, and I think that concludes, I just had a question mark beside Union Bank and Trust, $1.8 million. I know we replaced chairs some time ago, so what's needed now?
There are a number of things at the pavilion. So we have some drainage work to do at the lawn. The talent buildings, the temporary talent buildings that were 20 years old now need to be replaced. And there's some work that needs to occur to the stage as well.
Okay, all right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Councilman Moody, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Wright, while you're at the podium, can you give us a quick update on the Churston Bridge?
Yeah, so we're in the home stretch. We'll have some additional work to do under the southbound lanes, concrete repairs. Once those repairs are done, the final paving will be completed. So we have probably about another 45, 60 days, and we'll be done with that project.
Okay. While you're there, my colleague, Mr. Hugel, asked for more detail, and the Vice Mayor had someone ask her about the flooding in Ebony Heights. I had a lady approach me about the flooding on Summit Avenue. I guess my point is, and the Summit Avenue flooding has been going on probably as long as I've been on City Council. My question is, I know probably 10 years ago we did a flood study that said if we addressed it all at that time, it was like $500 million. I don't know where we stand with that, but the stories I hear in different communities, Summit Avenue, Ebony Heights, we still have people, depending on the amount of rain that has fallen, that literally have to wade through water to get to their homes. And I don't care what we do, we need to alleviate that. And nobody should have to endure that. And with the detail that Councilman Hugel mentioned, I would like to see when there's an overall project, whether it be stormwater, any infrastructure, we need to tag the communities along with the projects that are going to be occurring in those communities during each fiscal year. I was participating in the Great American Cleanup Saturday, and I was shocked when I crossed Cedar Lane over to Hedgerow, and as you know, the school right on that corner, and there was no ramp, no ADA compliance, no curb cut, no traffic, pedestrian automation there. And I see we've got 50,000 in for ADA compliance for curb cuts. I think ADA was probably signed into law in the late 80s. And wasn't there a time period for those mandates to occur? And I guess my question is, how much more do we have left to do? At no point should we have kids that have to cross a busy street. And I know during school hours we have crossing guards there, but kids cross those streets beyond the school hours as well, especially there are quite a few kids that live in that area of Brandon Square and other apartments and townhouses. So my question is, where do we stand on finally finishing the job of that we were mandated to do?
Which question here? You started off with apologies, but you started off with stormwater, you went into ADA.
Stormwater and the ADA.
So stormwater is a combination of things as we go through our CIP budget. So there are those neighborhood projects that basically are a combination of both water and sewer, where we work in those neighborhoods that you mentioned, such as Ebony Heights, Brighton, Highland Biltmore, and other neighborhoods that have those combined issues, where we take a holistic approach and we go in and we address everything. Then there are those instances where they're specifically stormwater driven, where there are culvert replacements like under George Washington Highway or at the city line right there at Airline Boulevard, where those are strictly stormwater projects. And some of that's due to the age and condition of infrastructure. Some of that is based on input as we dialogue back and forth with Public Works, and we systematically work our way through those issues with the available funding that we have in our CIP, as well as we take those opportunities to reach out for funding from those sources, such as certain state agencies that basically have funding available. Overall, I'd say we're working through those worst neighborhoods, and then we address those critical issues outside of those worst neighborhoods. As you remember from that study, you have a number of neighborhoods that are right at the top, and they're all there. These are the worst neighborhoods. Then everybody else is sort of lumped together. And so we're working on those critical neighborhoods and then picking and choosing based on condition and those other things in some of these other places. That's the long and short piece for stormwater. Specifically for ADA, there is no requirement or sunset or deadline for addressing ramps and things of that nature. You have to have a plan in place. We have a pedestrian and safety plan that's been approved. We also have, as part of the paving program and part of the way we get federal funds, where we get funds from VDOT because they're reimbursable. Anytime you touch a street in a certain manner, be an intersection, requires you to upgrade the ADA ramps there. Now, you may not be able to update them all at the same time, but you have to have a plan to do that update within the next, say, 18 to 24 months. So, for instance, the paving program's going down certain roads right now. We go along in front and behind the paving program to see what those streets are, what those intersections look like. If you have sidewalk, we evaluate and make a determination what the condition of those ramps are, document it, and then we come back behind them and go ahead and replace those ramps with different funding pots. The code that you referenced at $50,000, that's for citizens. So I'm a citizen, say, in Parkview. Got an ADA issue. I would like ramps at this intersection. Those funds are for basically citizen requests to come and upgrade ADA ramps and fill in sidewalk gaps. We plan out those other types of ADA improvements based on whatever type of project activities are going on. And there are funds available here recently for systemic improvements and upgrades. And we just recently put in an application to the state for some upgrades, specifically as they pertain to ADA. Speaking to hedgerow, there's a project in the budget to extend and widen Twin Pines Road to add some sidewalk and ADA and pedestrian amenities from where it stops at, I think, Bishop's Green, and takes it down to hedgerow.
What's the timetable for that, Mr. Wright?
Which one?
Twin Pines.
Right now, we're at 70% design. It is a state project, so we have to coordinate our reviews with VDOT. So once we get through that process and those construction funds are available, remember they give you design funds at a certain period, and then they give you construction funds. And so we have to wait for those construction funds to fall down before we can advertise. I can get you more information on that later.
What would be the trigger to address the pedestrian signals at Hedge Road?
I'd have to take a look at it and get back to you.
Okay. And on the flooding study, what percentage would you just ballpark to say that we've addressed the flooding issues?
So based on current standards, which aren't actually what you're actually seeing out in the real world, so I would say we're probably about 15% with the stuff that we've put in the ground and with the stuff that we have designed and in the queue, getting ready to sort of roll out. The issue becomes some of the stuff that we've done we'll have to revisit at some point in time. The 10-year flood is no longer the 10-year flood. We have a number of systems that were designed with, put in and installed without any design criteria. Then we went to a 10-year storm design criteria. Well, that 10-year storm we're seeing in real life is 20% more. So everything that we do as a city, we look at to try to capture that 20% or at least modify so we can be somewhat, be prepared. However, it's not mandated, it's not law yet, so we can't force private development to do that by regulation. So we're sort of in a catch-22.
And getting back to Summit Avenue, what is in the plans to alleviate that situation?
We just recently completed for that next phase, Brighton South Portsmouth, that includes Summit Avenue, the preliminary engineering report. So the next step would be to move on to 30% plan so we can start coordination with the private utilities and then continue the design from there.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. And I do have one question. Related on page, slide 13, we have 2 outdoor recreation facility repair and the Prentice Place recreation area. Can you just give me some specifics on what those 2 are?
So the outdoor facility repair is just a general line item for general upkeep and maintenance for all of the outdoor recreation facilities under the Parks and Recs umbrella. So we'll pick and choose some if they qualify, fall into CDBG funds. We'll leave those there. Others we'll use CIP funds for. There are some that are a little bit unique and they're grant funded. So it's a combination of funds to address both recreation buildings and outdoor recreation facilities. The Prentice Place recreation area is to provide some addition. I think the Civic League has expressed a desire of where they want the recreation facility to go. This will just allow us to do some additional investigation to ensure that site will support what they want and start to design if the investigation holds out to bear fruit.
And Mr. Wright, can you confirm, is there a rehabilitation program scheduled for Cavalier Manor Rec Center in the next quarter or soon to come?
So we're currently waiting on pricing from the contractor to do both the gym and the recreation facility. And those funds are in their current CIP.
Thank you, guys.
All right. It is now my pleasure to discuss with you the fiscal year 2025 proposed budget at a high-level overall perspective, including the long-term and short-term fiscal stressors, expenditure categories and key variances, and additional requests. This is intended to give you an opportunity to ask questions and any other discussion City Council would like to have for further dialogue on items of interest.
And if I would ask that Mr. Burke, if you could just go through the presentation and then we'll entertain questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So this presentation will review the trends impacting the 2025 budget, and at the end, again, we'll have discussion and dialogue. The city must overcome a variety of fiscal stressors. Some are the same every year, and others can crop up in one year and disappear the next. Financial pressures are those which push the city's expenditures to exceed its revenues. Among those stressors, the city must respond to a variety of legal, popular, and ethical mandates. The city must keep pace with the growth of its debt obligations, personnel costs, and retirement systems, and we call those the non-discretionary expenditures. And it must address its needs, even though there are fewer and fewer contractors due to contractor consolidation. The last 2 years have also pushed the city to pay for inflation while respecting the needs of its citizens as they face higher prices. Recently, and then lastly, our workforce was recently impacted by the Great Recession. So a lot of people who held higher level positions left the city, and now we're having to go through hiring, I wouldn't say replacement, but to hire those positions back. Right. When people think about local government, they consider the services they see in the associated departments that provide them, such as the parks, libraries, or police and fire. This chart shows how the budget breaks down by service areas and how they have increased or decreased over time. Note that there were substantial increases to public safety areas as they did a large salary compression study at the end of fiscal year 2023, and you're seeing that being impacted in 2025. And you will also discuss the salaries in particular later. So public safety, which includes police, fire, rescue, and emergency services, is the largest portion of city expenses at $81.4 million. Excuse me. Can you go to the... Okay, I guess we have the wrong chart here. At $81.4 million. Go back. Sorry. Okay. At $81.4 million, and this is roughly 25% of the budget. The next largest expense in the city budget is the city's contribution to Portsmouth Public Schools. This is 24% of the overall budget, and this year is a 24% increase from FY 2024. Other non-departmental expenses are 17% of the overall budget. General government includes much of the city's administrative departments, such as the city manager, constitutional officer, city council, and this totals $24 million, or 7% of the overall budget. Public Works comprises 5% of the budget and increased by 14% due to a realignment of capital maintenance costs from the CIP to the operating budget. Another way of considering the budget is by looking at types of expenditures, such as, salaries and benefits represent personnel costs, and combined, these are 36% of the overall budget. You will see substantial increases to contractual and other operating categories, which were heavily impacted by inflation, as well as contractor consolidation, as we mentioned earlier. Other categories include non-departmental, the contribution to Portsmouth Public Schools, transfers to other funds, and this includes the match to social services, BHS, and enterprise funds, contracts for services, internal services, and other expenditures, which comprise anything not necessarily easily categorizable by the other categories. And here you see them broken out as a pie chart. You can see that the school's contribution and salaries and benefits are the largest portions of the annual budget, along with transfers. Transfers is mostly the debt service. So when the city makes its debt service payments, that is funded by a transfer from the general fund to the debt service fund. All right. Overall, revenues grew by 8%. Local revenues grew 8% overall, with the largest with the largest increase coming from real property taxes, which grew 9%. And also we saw a strong performance of our sales and use tax and restaurant meals tax, which fueled the other local taxes portion to increase at 11% overall. Now you will note that utility taxes are declining, are projected to decline. This is for two reasons. First off, telecommunications, when the state wrote those original bills, they only included landlines, and landline usage has been declining over time. And they did not ever fathom or consider adding cellular phones to that, or even VoIP or voice over internet phones to that. So that, unless there's some change to the enabling legislation, we will see that continue to decline. The other one is the water utility tax. We've seen that steadily decline over the year, we saw a 1-year decline on that one. We're going to have to wait until the end of the year. It could be possible that the checks just haven't come in yet, but we have not seen the revenue at the time we would expect to see it. But it is possible at the end that those end up catching up to where we'd expect them to be, based on the water and sewer collections that we've seen so far. As this chart shows, local taxes are the primary source of funding for city services and account for 70% of the general fund. State revenues are those which are remitted to the city by the state, and that includes that would include all of your shared services for such as the sheriff, constitutional officers, and it also includes the casino gaming revenue. The state collects that and remits 6% of the total to the city. It also includes state grants such as VDOT and also 599 funding, which supports public safety, notably police. I'll now pause for any questions.
Mr. Burke, I do have a question. On slide number 8, when you referred to the utility tax that is continuing to decline due to landlines, which it was based upon, is that something that we can lobby the state with as one of our legislative priorities in our upcoming legislative priority? Because as you had indicated, currently there is no rule as it relates to cellular phones.
You could. So there is a 75-cent, I believe, tax on any cellular phone, and that is specifically earmarked for E911, and it's supposed to go to E911 system maintenance. You could, as far as the budget officer is concerned, and that I can't speak for the legislative.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Hugo, sir, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So if we go back to slide 4, Mr. Burke, the number at the bottom says 5% change. I'm not sure what that number means, because it's the same 326 million in FY25 and 299 in FY24 that's shown on slide 6, which
That
is...
should be 9.1.
Okay, all right. Got it. So over on the revenue slide, slide 8. So, if I was sitting home right now and I saw a 9% change in real property revenue, I think I'd be irritated, but just for clarity, the portion of that that's tied to assessment increases is not 9%. So we've had a combination of assessment increases, which I think are about 5%, and growth in the tax base for real estate, yes?
It is that. It is also, if you remember last year, there was the reassessment going on at the time of budget adoption. Council wanted, we discussed it with council to have a fund balance appropriation in the event that the reassessment did not, I don't want to say perform, did not match what was needed. So there was a $3.6 million fund balance appropriation to cover any shortfall in there. So that would also include that as well.
Okay. And I was too busy slipping through slides to hear where you said the gaming revenue shows up on slide 8.
All other revenues.
All other, okay.
And that's most of the increase, to be frank with you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Vice Mayor Lucas Burke, you have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Burke, Councilman Hugo asked the same question. I was wondering between slides 8 and 9 where the casino revenue, so it's just factored into all other revenues. We don't have a specific breakout for just the gaming yet.
We do. Whenever we do these presentations, we want to lump them together a little bit so that we can kind of classify expenditures, because if we were to do the whole thing, it would be 10 pages of just numbers.
Right.
So when we categorized them with all other, and it's mostly state. There is, I believe there's also transfers are in there as well. So we get some money from different funds. I think VHS does some, and public utilities also does some transfers. But most of that, probably a slight majority of that, is from the state.
Okay. I guess maybe sometime in the future, maybe as city manager, we can get just a presentation on the gaming. I guess people are asking, and I guess in a future year, how we're going to allocate what we received in, the current fiscal year, how it's going to be allocated to whatever projects we're going to look at for next year, maybe. how we're going to disperse or how we're going to reallocate it to our budget and to the community.
Councilman Moody, sir, you have the floor.
Under the other revenues, the gaming also includes the off-site machines, tabletop, whatever, I forget what they call them.
It would, yes, sir.
And with that being pretty much eliminated as far as Portsmouth's concerned, is that a negligible loss?
I would think so. I'd have to go back and look. The state does not provide a ton of detail when they give us those remitted taxes.
Right.
Typically, it's just a lump sum. And oftentimes, if you ask them, they'll tell you they don't know who gave them what. So I would assume it will be negligible, but there will be some, we will find out, is probably also an equally honest answer, that we'll find out whenever we look at the receipts at the end of the year. But it was actually, there's another tax that it was included in, not strictly that casino gaming specific line.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Hugo, sir, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just two more points to make, not questions, but comments. Again, if I'm sitting at home looking at this and thinking, 9.1% expenditure increase, really a revenue increase, that triggers an expenditure increase year over year from 24 to 25. Sounds like a lot, but if you look at 23 to 24, the increase was 10.9% year over year, so we're a little bit less than we were in budget season last year. The other point to make on slide 6, the schools contribution. So in our budget book, we talk about a $15 million request from the school superintendent. It's not a $15 million request, it's a $78 million request. That's what's shown here on the school's contribution line. The $15 million is a $15 million increase over last year's request. And as this shows, that's 23.7%, almost a full quarter more in the school system request that we're faced with this year compared to a year ago. Typically, that year-over-year increase is similar to what's shown here. 59 to 63 is what the change was from 23 to 24, so about $4 million. So we're actually wrestling with a $15 million increase from what we're funding the schools now to what they've asked for in FY25. 10 million of that to salaries, 5 million of that to technology and other stuff, security, other stuff. Thank you.
And with that, I just want to make sure that, the community is clear. We as a council made a huge commitment this year, a quarter of our budget in that regard, in terms of our revenue to our schools. And so I think that all of us here, that was you, we really understand the impact and the importance, but 23.7% is a huge commitment. And I think this body has committed over the years consistently to ensuring that our schools have the resources they need to get the job done. So I think that's very well done in terms of what we were able to do this year, and the citizens should please take heed of that. Thank you.
Right, and lastly, we will go through some proposed changes to the budget. You will receive all the recommended changes based on council discussion. Those will come to you in the form of a proposed to adopted reconciliation memo, and the changes will be included or reflected in the budget ordinances that you receive in 2 to 3 weeks for adoption at the budget meetings. First, we had a recommendation to reallocate the medical debt relief program and to put that money towards ETSI, the Skilled Trades Academy, Next Gen scholarships, and the Virginia Symphony. ETSI, their request came in, we discussed it with the service provider. They were requesting that funding. before the end of the fiscal year. So this would be something we'd be looking to do in FY '24. And so that way we would it would not necessarily be reflected in FY '25, but the rest of them under that item would be under FY '25, and it would be $300,000 of programs. Next, there was a request from Senior Services of Virginia to increase their funding, which funds Meals on Wheels. It's the local share of the Meals on Wheels program, and that would increase that from $65,000 to $84,000. We had a staff-driven request to increase the Children's Services Act funding by $275,000 to get the match correct for FY 2025, and this is based on FY '24 increases that they experienced and you guys voted on a few weeks ago. And then lastly, staff would like some direction on how to handle the local contribution if the state funds teacher raises at 3% as opposed to 1%. We don't have a good mechanism for handling that, given the timing of the General Assembly action being May 13th. We will not know with any time before then how to handle that. So we're just looking for direction on how to manage that topic.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Barnes, you have the floor, sir.
Could you elaborate a little bit more about the Next Gen Scholarship, what that is and what that does for the city of Portsmouth?
Yes, sir. That is scholarships to students in Portsmouth. It's administered by the Hampton Roads Workforce Foundation, and I can provide more information on that. Sorry.
Councilman Hugel, sir, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So regarding the last bullet, what do we do with the decrease in our contribution to the schools, assuming that the state funds 3% instead of 1% raises? I'd like to propose, the budget that we originally talked about was going to lower the water and sewer rate increase from 5% to 2%. The current budget book took that away, so right now the water and sewer rate increase is back up to 5%. I'd like to propose that we use a portion of the money, I think it's about $1 million, that we would need to push the water and sewer rate back down to a 2% increase. So I'd like, assuming that the state increases their raise to 3% over 1%, I think that's in the neighborhood of $3 million. So the first $1 million I'd like to see go to the water and sewer rate back to 2%. And then whatever's left over, I'd like to see us apply it to increase the real estate credit. Right now, we originally talked about a 8-cent credit. We're back to a 5-cent credit, and I'd like to see us push it back to 6 or 7 or even 8% if we can. And so the easiest way, I think, for the budget guys to deal with this thing is to not nibble away on the edges, but to give them some significant things that they can apply the money to. So $1 million to fix the water and sewer rate, and then the other $2 million should lower or increase the credit by about 2%, since it's about $1 million a penny. So that would mean $1.23, I guess, per 100, if we gave a 7-cent credit with that other 2%. That all tracking?
I understand what you're getting at. I think the concern would be the timing. Would we have that information in enough time for the real estate bills?
Well, can we build into the budget approval a unfunded priority list that says if that money comes back, the first thing we're going to fund is the lowering the water and sewer rate to a 2% increase, and the second thing we're going to fund is an increased credit for the real estate rate by whatever's left over.
Mr. City Manager, do you want to address that, or would you like that?
Yes, sir, Councilman Hugo, you're talking about building a contingency budget so that we move forward the way we are, and if that should come to pass, we already have a plan built to take care of it?
Yeah,
instead
it's
of coming back?
already pre-approved, baked in as an unfunded priority list that the council has agreed to, so that if the money does come back, we don't go back through another stork dance, but just, you have the authority baked into the budget book that we fund priority 1 first, priority 2 second, with whatever money we get back from the state.
Okay, that makes sense. Then wherever the money runs out, the priorities run out also.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
And is that something, so based on those two asks, I think Vice Mayor Lucas Burke has the floor, but it probably would be appropriate to call for a consensus since we're spending council's, the citizens' money on that regard, and just so that everybody is on board and aware of that. So Vice Mayor, you have the floor, and then we can come back to that question and call a consensus on those two items. Is that okay to everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Vice Mayor, you have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Mayor. And I guess mine may be a consensus question as well. Last meeting, I don't know if it falls under last meeting or if we still ask, since we're talking about proposed changes to the budget. I had asked about, the Wesley Center had put in an application, and I guess it comes under HUD funding. It's a reimbursable type of option, so I didn't see anything that was listed here, or if we got a consensus to request that they be included.
Well, I do know that there was some discussion about that. And Dr. Patton, if you could you please come forward and address that concern? Because I know that you had some information to address that concern. Hold on. Let me just make sure we're doing things the right way. Mr. Manager, could you please ask Dr. Patton to come forward to provide that information?
Absolutely. So, hold your spot. Hold your spot. Absolutely. Dr. Patton, would you please address the mayor's concerns?
Yes. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council. At our last meeting, Mr. Kramer presented information as it pertained to projects that were funded or projects that were considered. And one of those projects was the Wesley Center, who had an ask for a daycare center or work with Head Start in order for those funds to be moved forward. Mr. Kramer, in the follow-up, indicated that in order for a project of that magnitude to go forward, the Wesley Center would have had to have approval from Head Start in order to implement a program within their building, which was never received. And so therefore, with the HUD funds and the CDBG funds, that could not be approved or funded because the required request from them was not received.
Okay.
And so if you would like Mr. Carter to follow up with you all on actually what was presented by Mr. Kramer as it pertains to that, I have a written statement that I could provide to the manager. He could get it out to you tomorrow.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
But there's some federal regulations.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. So back to the original consensus request. Councilman Hugo, sir, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So I will ask for my colleagues' consent to approve adding an unfunded priority list to the FY25 budget. Priority number 1 is to use state funds coming back to reduce the water and sewer rate increase from 5%, which is in the budget book, to 2%, which is what we talked about earlier on in the budget discussions. And then with whatever money is left over from that priority number 2 would be to use whatever funds left to increase the real estate tax credit by whatever percentage we can increase it to give that money back to the taxpayers.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Carter, I'm just going to ask for a consensus amongst my colleagues and to accept that request. If we could all provide a consensus by show of hands to accept the request by our colleague. Do you have it, Ms. Sherrod? Okay, thank you, ma'am. There were a couple items for consideration, if we could go back to those that required a consensus, if I recall, during your presentation, sir?
Earlier on with this
Yes.
capital projects?
Yes, you said there were 2 projects that required consensus.
Sorry, 3.
3?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So,
So,
first,
so before we do that, Mr. Carter, you recall the 2 projects, or the 3 projects, right?
I have 2 of them.
Right, I know, I wrote down 2. So can you restate what the 3 projects are?
all right, so it is the CTE Center,
I have that one.
$6 million to fund the continuing rehabilitation and reuse of that building, $500,000 to program and begin on the new K-8 school, in addition to out-year funding as well, but that's not appropriated. And then lastly, $1 million to acquire a consolidated one-stop revenue collection system.
Were you okay with that, sir?
Yes, sir. I did not write down that last one for the new software revenue, for revenue collection software. So, yes, those are the 3 that we need a consensus on.
Okay, thank you, sir. Councilman Hugel, sir, you have the floor.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, while, as we're considering those, I guess I have a question about the CTE school. I know when we visited that last year with the school surplus, we had an estimate for what it was going to take to do the DAP conversion. I wonder if the $6 million that we're asked now to provide consent to, if I don't know if it's probably not Mr. Burke, maybe Mr. Wright knows, if we're far enough along in the understanding of the work to know that $6 million is going to pay for what needs to be paid for to produce a CTE school.
Mr. Carter, could you please ask your staff to come forward, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Wright, could you respond to Councilman Hugo's question?
So I'm currently trying to get up to speed on this project. I've had conversations with the architect and with the team from the schools that's working on this project. From best I can tell, because it is not technically new construction, based on current costs and things that they've seen, it's their best guess estimate based on similar projects and similar types of construction in the area. So for this point in time, I think it's probably as good an estimate as you're going to get.
And Mr. Wright, do you know, does that include outfitting, like the auto shop with all of the auto shop stuff that's needed to, so the $6 million isn't going to produce a shell of a building, it's going to produce the CTE classrooms that we need with the stuff in them so that the teachers can start teaching? Do you know that?
I don't think it includes F&E. I don't think it includes the furnishings for the building. I thought from the last conversation that I had with them, they had a separate pot of money for those types of activities.
Okay, so Mr. City Manager, could we follow up on that to understand, you know, we're in for a penny, in for a pound at this point, so we're going to keep going and build the school. But I want to understand, is $6 million going to get us there, or is $6 million the next down payment, and there's another bill that we don't yet know or understand while we figure out how to turn a building into an auto shop and a welding lab and the other things that they want to do?
So if I can restate that, I'm assuming you're looking to find out exactly what $6 million will buy.
Well, and what other, is there another bill coming, I guess? What else hasn't been estimated in the $6 million that we're looking at now?
Okay. Yes, sir. I agree with that.
And with that, there are a couple other consensus items, and I think it's a time where we can at least consider, I know the $500,000 for design work for the K-8 program, that's a consideration. Do we have a consensus on, among my colleagues, to consider that at this time with a show of hands? Thank you. And Mr. Carter, the last item there was a request for consensus, and if you could ask that be restated so that we could take a consensus on that as well, sir.
Yes, sir, that's a $1 million allocation for a new revenue collection software.
And are my colleagues okay with the explanation on that item? Call for a consensus, please. Thank you all, and thank you, sir. If there are no other questions for Mr. Burke, I believe that concludes the presentation, sir. And thank you very much, Mr. Burke, and thank you, Mr. Wright. Our next item will be item number 3, City Council Liaison Reports. And are there any City Council Liaison reports from my colleagues at this time? Seeing none, we do have a need for a closed session. And Madam Vice Mayor, would you please read the closed session motion?
I will. I move to go into a closed meeting, A, pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2-3711A6, for the purpose of discussion or consideration of the investment of public funds where competition or bargaining is involved, where, if made public initially, the financial interests of the governmental unit would be adversely affected, specifically regarding the Hampton Roads Regional Jail, and B, pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2-3711A1, for the purpose of discussing appointments to boards and commissions.
We have a motion and a second. I would ask that my colleagues please vote electronically.
This motion has been adopted 6-0.
Thank you, ma'am. We are now in closed session. Ladies and gentlemen, we do have a need to come out of close, so if I could ask Vice Mayor Lucas Burke to read the motion to come out of
Yes,
close.
I will. I hereby move that each council member certify that to the best of his or her knowledge, 1, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and 2, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting just concluded.
Thank you, ma'am. We have motion and a second. Please vote electronically.
This motion has been adopted 6-0.
Thank you, Ms. Sherrod. We are out of closed, and that concludes our work session. We will recess for 5 minutes, and we will reconvene at 7:12.